Well, Stephen, yeah, thanks for your time. First of all, if you can tell me a bit more about what viewers can expect to see on BBC Two over the next few Thursday nights.
Yeah, it's a story of of gangsters really that operated in Birmingham in the 1920s. It's a family story, a family saga, and the story of one man who returns from the trenches, quite traumatised, along with his brothers, and decides that he wants to turn a criminal family enterprise respectable. But first of all, he has to do the dirty work to get himself into a position where he can go straight.
It's a drama that's got so much significance to your own family, hasn't it, with your dad's uncle? Can you tell me a bit more about that and some of the research perhaps you had to do to find out, to get the story?
Yeah, I mean, my mum and dad grew up in Small Heath in Birmingham, and both told me stories about this world that I never read about because it didn't seem to be depicted anywhere. Where my mum was a bookish runner when she was 9 years old, and my dad told me about his uncles who ran illegal betting shops, and there was, from their stories, these little snapshots of a quite glamorous world of gangsters and betting and evading the police that, as I say, didn't seem to have ever made it into the history books. It felt a bit like a secret history. So when I started to do the research, I actually found it was even more remarkable than the stories I've been told.
You mentioned that sort of secret history. How passionate are you about getting Birmingham's history into the national spotlight? Because, of course, we're the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution and various other things.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's a personal thing because these are the stories I heard, and because they're Birmingham people, this is the city whose story I know. But it just strikes me that often Birmingham is a blank canvas. It doesn't really have a media profile in the way that other cities do, which is fantastic for me because it means I can start with a fresh page. And the truth is that Birmingham's history is remarkable, that it was the workshop of the world. It was manufacturing all these amazing amounts of weapons and cars and metal goods that were exported all over the world. But that meant that people living in the city were living in this really intense environment. There was a lot of hard work, a lot of hard men, a lot of hard drinking. It was a pretty wild town. And it was also a melting pot because it drew lots of people in from all over Britain to come and work here. So inevitably there are these amazing stories.
Why was it so important for you then to tell the Birmingham story from your own perspective?
Yeah, it's because I think everyone must tell their own story really, and to get that story out there, it seems to me to be opening a book that hasn't been opened before. It seems to be revealing a secret history that people don't know about.
You used the Black Country Living Museum, didn't you, as a sort of a backdrop for part of the series? How was that? It's like a ready-made film set, is it not?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's one of the few parts of the West Midlands where the infrastructure of that era still exists because of the Second World War, and then the town planners. A lot of Birmingham was torn down. But yeah, it's a perfect environment to shoot, and because it's got the canal, a lot of the action takes place on canals and canal boats. It's still got that canal running through it, so it was perfect.
Do you think this series will prompt viewers to perhaps explore a bit of Birmingham's heritage and history, like the back-to-back houses, Soho House, Aston Hall? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I think that you mentioned Soho House. I mean, I think that is another fascinating story that has not been told, where effectively the modern world was invented in a house in Handsworth by a group of scientists. And I just think, even more importantly, I think, is that people examine their own family history. And there's nothing unusual about my particular family history. Everyone, if they research their family, will find all of these amazing characters living in historical times that, if you look at the individual, you'll see explanations for what was going on politically and globally.
You've got a background with Birmingham, your family.
Mm-hmm.
You like to visit Birmingham's present-day attractions, I hope. Are there any hidden gems in the city that you enjoy exploring?
St Andrews, Birmingham City's ground. There's a hidden gem that not many people visit. And I mean, I still like Small Heath because it reminds me, when I was a kid, my parents used to take me to the matches.
And the pub as well.
And the pub called the Garrison, which is an acquired taste at the moment, but it's incredible because it's got a lot of history. My granddad used to drink there, and I've used that as the sort of centre of the Peaky Blinders story. as their headquarters.
And is it true you took Killian to the garrison as well to do a bit of research?
I took Killian and invited a few of my friends that I grew up with. He was interested in getting the accent right, so we spent a long day, a Saturday. He tape recorded everything that was said, and we just talked about Birmingham and their experiences in the garrison, and it was a hell of a day. It was fantastic.
Talk to me a bit about the accent then. That's made some news over the past few days. Is it a real chance really to give the accent a bit of profile?
Yeah.
I've spotted you mentioning about that. Is it hard to drill it into Killian and the rest of the cast?
It was more that Killian wanted to get it right, I think, and I was very anxious that it wasn't that caricature accent that people do when they do the Birmingham accent, which I don't know why that's developed. I think what's happened is that in the past actors have got it wrong, and then other actors have imitated the actors who got it wrong rather than go to the real thing. And the point I was making to Killian is that it's quite a fast, hard accent. It's not slow. And when he listened to people talking, he immediately got that, and then spent weeks and weeks walking around his own house talking with this accent. And I think he's nailed it. He's done a really good job.
Talk about the accent and perhaps Birmingham's profile nationally and internationally. Do you think there's still work that Birmingham needs to do to get that profile out there?
Yeah, I think that all it needs to do, I think, is tell its own story and not be afraid to tell its own story. And I think that, it's one of those things. I think Birmingham people stay in Birmingham often. In London, you'll meet a lot of people from Manchester, a lot of people from Liverpool, because they want to get out. Whereas in Birmingham, people tend to stay. So that sort of pollen doesn't get distributed. And I just think that, like any other major industrial city, it's got so many incredible stories, and why not tell them? So I think, if there are writers in Birmingham, filmmakers in Birmingham, look at home first.
In terms of the modern day, we've seen the new library opening this month, New Street Stations cropping up and will be opening in a couple of months, a couple of years. There's lots going on, isn't there? So it's a great place to be. Yeah,
I think it's an interesting place, Birmingham, because there is always change. And it's more so than any other city. I go away and I come back and everything's changed again. And everything's been knocked down. And it's a shame because you lose the heritage, but there's something about it that is actually quite different and interesting and vibrant. It's I think of it as the only city where the bypass goes straight through the centre of town. The big roads are all there in the middle, and they were probably mistakes made by 60s developers, but it's given it this different feel now, a different character. So, embrace it, I think.
The city wasn't used quite so much in the first series in terms of filming location, but I gather you're keen to come back for maybe series 2 and 3.
Very keen to use real locations in Birmingham wherever possible. It's difficult because, if you want a street of terrace houses, then you're going to be taking it over for however many weeks, and people have to live their lives. So we found a place in Liverpool that was about to be demolished, so we could use it, at our convenience. But yeah, I'd love to find locations in Brooklyn.
Have you had a chance to sort of go around while you've been here, the city sort of lending itself as a sort of a film TV backdrop?
Just now, we were in Small Heath and in the garrison, and it's one of those islands where that world has survived, and the back-to-backs are still there and the terraces are still there. It's a question of the practicalities of using those locations. If we can maybe get that organised, it would be great to say that this is really where it happened.
Just very finally, how excited are you in terms of all the coverage that Birmingham has had over the past few days, few weeks or so, looking ahead to the series?
I'm astonished, really. It's fantastic, but I think that's evidence that this is new territory. In other words, this is not the third series about Birmingham. It's not the second series. It's, you know what I mean? It's like the first one, and so suddenly you get all this attention. And great, long may it last.